thinking different, because to think the same is just too, I don't know, too ordinary. Who wants to be ordinary when we can be a little bit extraordinary? So we're going to get started with chapter 51 of Tanya. And as you may know, there are 53 chapters of Tanya. So we are getting to the big finish and some of the really big ideas of Tanya. And tonight, as we start chapter 51, the Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya, is going to hearken back to some ideas that he first introduced to us in chapter 35. So what is that idea that he introduced in chapter 35? So it has to do with the divine lamp, which I'm going to explain in a moment. So there was this child, and I wrote about it. Hey, Sandrine, there was this child, and I wrote about it in the email, who was considered a prodigy. This child was a scholar, a prodigy. He was, the Talmud mentions him. There were scholars that visited his town, and this young boy comes out and he blows everybody away with his knowledge. He's known in classic Jewish literature as the Yenuka, which means the young one. I'm trying to think of a good, like, modern day, version of that. The kid, or whatever, like the kid who is this absolute genius. He's quoted in the Zohar as well. The Yenuka, this young boy, is quoted in Zohar, in the work of Kabbalah, as sharing a mystical insight. And again, the Alter Rebbe first introduces us to this in chapter 35, but he comes around full circle to it in chapter 51, which we're starting tonight. So therefore, let me introduce the introduction. Let me tell you what he says in chapter 35. Here's what the Yenuka says. I actually have, I have a chapter 35 with me. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to explain a little bit what he's saying. All right, hold on one second. Let me grab this. It's actually in the beginning of our self-same book. Okay. So there's a verse from Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, written by King Solomon, that says, HaChacham, the wise person, Einav Barosho, his eyes are in his head. And the obvious question is, what? Only wise people have eyes in their heads? Where's everybody else's eyes? Like, what does it mean? That a Chacham, a wise person, his eyes are in his head. That seems to be across the board. So the Zohar comments this question. V'chi va'an asare einai devar nash. Do people have eyes in different places? Of course it's in the head. Rather, it means the following. We've learned, I'm just reading to you from chapter 35. We've learned that a man must not go 4 cubits, 6 feet, right? Outside of the social distancing bubble, right? Don't go 6 feet while bareheaded. Why? Because the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests upon his head. So because there's a divine presence resting on his head, so you should wear something on the head. Therefore, he continues in chapter 35, every wise man has his eyes, which means his perspective, trained on his head. In other words, what does it mean that a wise person's eyes are in his head? A wise person is always aware, is always cognizant of the fact that God's presence rests on his or her head. But it's not done yet. Now, when his eyes, in other words, when his focus is there on his own or her own head, i.e. the divine presence that's on their head, so he must know that this light kindled above his head requires oil. That's what it says. So everyone has divine light resting on their head. And a wise person is aware of it. You see, it's one thing that it's there. It's another thing to be aware of it. Yeah. Because the most amazing miracles could be right in front of us, but we might be oblivious to it. Why? Because our eyes are looking elsewhere, or think. It's not only physical eyes. Our perception is elsewhere. So the Zohar tells us Kabbalah teaches us, it's brought in chapter 35 of Tanya, that who is the chacham, who is a wise person, who's a wise guy in a good way? Somebody who realizes the holiness, the aura of holiness on one's own head. But here's the kicker, that light that shines above our heads requires oil, kind of like a lamp. Think about a lamp, right? An oil lamp, like an old school oil lamp. So you have a fire that burns. The lamp is illuminated, but it's not just a fire. You can't. A lamp is not just a flame hovering in the middle of nowhere. To have a flame, you need two other ingredients. What are the ingredients to have a flame? What are the ingredients? You also need. No, I'm mute. No, unmute. What do we need? What do we need to make this happen?
A wick.
A wick. What else?
A container for the oil.
Good. And you just said it. And the oil, right? So in order for there to be a flame, you need to have fire, right? But the fire can't just be hovering. Fire has to have a wick and oil and a container, but it needs to have the two ingredients of wick and oil in order for it to burn. So the same thing is true, the Yenuka says, this prodigy, this young boy who was this spiritual genius. So he's quoted in Zohar as saying, human beings need the other ingredients as well. So again, I'm gonna read it again. Now, when his focus is there, he must know that this light kindled above his head requires oil. Listen to this. For man's body is the wick that retains the flame, and the light is kindled above it. So thus King Solomon cried out, saying, let there be no lack of oil above your head. This is also from Ecclesiastes. V'shemen al roshcha al yachsar. Make sure that you don't skimp on the oil on your head. He wasn't talking about some sort of, hair care product. He meant that in order for the divine light to be kindled above our heads, we need a wick, and we also need oil. For the light, going back inside, for the light over his head requires oil, meaning good deeds. This is going to be the key of today's session. The light over his head, the flame requires oil, the fuel. What's the fuel? It's mitzvot, good deeds. And for this reason, the wise man's eyes are in his head. And that's the end of the Zohar's statement. So here's where I'm going to pick this. Yeah.
Rabbi Ari, I don't study a lot of coincidences in Judaism. And we're studying chapter 51.
Correct.
Hayenu today is studying chapter 35.
So
is that coincidence, or there's got to be more?
So it's not coincidence. It's not coincidence. The reason for this is because the 20th day of Adar, which is today, the section of Tanya that we study today is from chapter 35. So even though in our Tanya study, we're chapter 51, but chapter 51 harkens back to 35, which is connected with today's daily Tanya. So that's an incredible cross-section connection that we have right today. It's amazing. Thanks for pointing that out. It's an amazing connection that we have. We're studying chapter 51 in our Thursday night class, but today's day, the 20th of Adar, we're studying chapter 35, and the two chapters are intertwined because 51 picks up on the theme that 35 began. So 35, he introduces this teaching about the lamp, the human lamp, the divine lamp, which again, I'm going to elaborate on in a moment. And then he goes off to explain other things related and then circles back right here in chapter 51, which we're going to start tonight in this class. So, but yeah, thanks for pointing out that beautiful divine providence intersection. So here we go. A lamp, let's just go back to the lamp. So picture an oil lamp. So the first thing you need is a vessel, but we're not going to focus on the vessel. You need a container, you need space for it. Okay. But then in that vessel, first of all, you pour oil, and then you stick in a wick, and then you light it on fire, and then it burns. So it's lit on fire. It's illuminating. The fire illuminates. It gives light. It gives warmth. The flame is doing that. But as I said a few moments ago, and the Zohar says, this child says, a flame can't exist without a supporting cast, right? When you have a lamp and you have oil sitting there, doesn't give light. If you have a lamp with oil and a wick, doesn't give light. What gives light? The flame. But the flame, so the flame is the main star of the show, right? It's, oh, I have a flame. The room is now lit. But you know what? You cannot have the flame without Riva. Choking. You can't have a flame. You came in nicely over there. That was a nice little situation. You can't have a flame that's burning without fuel and without a wick to hold on to it. Huh? Fire. Yeah, we're talking about fire, right? The fire is not going to burn unless you have a wick. You can't light oil on fire. I mean, I guess there are oil fires, but I don't know. So you have a normative situation of an oil lamp. You have oil, the fuel, a wick, and the thing. Even a candle. Think about a candle. A candle is just an oil lamp that you can carry around, right? And it doesn't spill. I mean, unless it's lit. But a candle is basically a solid form of fuel, right? Whether it's a beeswax candle or a paraffin candle or whatever they make candles out of, right? So so think of it as, again, fuel, wick, and flame. Those are your three ingredients. And when you buy the little box of Hanukkah candles, right? The actual candles, the Hanukkah candles, yes. So you have fuel and a wick, and then you attach the flame to it, and it works. If you had here's the bottom line. Bottom line is you can't just have a flame on its own. The flame needs a holder, and it needs to burn the fuel to keep on going. The moment it runs out of fuel, it'll burn up the wick, and then the fire's out. Right? So that's the way it works. So you need fuel and you need a wick for your flame to keep on burning. So he says in Tanya, so what do these correspond to in our spiritual reality? Every human being is a lamp. A lamp. It says, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. There's another verse that says, the lamp of God is the soul of the human being, which means that you and I, we are the lamp. We have three components. You ready? We have the fire. We just read it before. I read it before to you. We have the fire, the divine fire above our heads, the light, the aura above our heads. That's like the flame's on top. But the flame needs to hold on to something. So you need a wick. What's the wick? The body. But you can't just have a flame and a wick. You need fuel. What's the fuel? Good deeds. The mitzvot that we do. So the three components of the human lamp are the flame of the soul, the wick of the body, and the fuel of the mitzvot. Does that make sense? Should I say it again? Three components? All right. Starting from top down. Flame is like the soul. The God and the soul, like the spiritual part. The wick is the body. And the fuel are the good deeds that we do. So here's the bottom line. You ready for the bottom line? When a human being of flesh and blood does a good deed, so you combine the wick and the oil, you dip your wick in the oil, right? So your body is doing a good deed, doing a mitzvah. So now you have a commingling of oil, mitzvah, and a body doing it, which is the wick. And it's inspired with the enthusiasm of the soul. You got fire. That's how we illuminate the world. So stated it's a beautiful imagery. Stated simply, how do we bring light to a dark world? It's by us who possess a soul and a body doing a mitzvah. When we do a good deed, something positive in the world, it's the oil, and our body's doing it. That's the wick, and it's motivated and driven by our soul. That's the flame. That's how it illuminates the world. Asks the Alter Rebbe. So all of that is straight from the Zohar, 2,000-year-old Kabbalistic text, and straight from there. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya asked the question, why do you need to do a mitzvah to bring light into the world? Why isn't it enough that you have a soul? Why do you need the fuel? Why isn't the soul itself, which is the flame, why isn't it enough? Now you might be thinking, well, we already heard the answer. The answer is because you can't just have fire and wick. What's that going to do? Fire and wick. Or you can't just have fire, it's got to have fuel. But why can't the soul, he asks, why can't the soul be its own fuel? Theoretically, why do you need to do a mitzvah? Why can't you just have the mere presence of a soul should bring light into the world? Why isn't the flame of the soul enough to act as its own fuel and wick and it should be an all-in-one experience? Why do you need to do a mitzvah? Listen to the answer. And this is what he starts in 35 and we pick up in 51. This is well, hold on. Before I give the answer, does the question make sense at all? The imagery makes sense so far? Ish? Yes? Yes, it does? Okay. Again, there are three components: flame, wick, and oil, or flame, wick, and fuel. Those correspond to soul, body, mitzvah. And the question we're asking is, why do you need a soul in a body doing a mitzvah to bring light? Why isn't a soul enough on its own? So here's the answer. In other words, why do you need to do a mitzvah? Why does the mitzvah? It's like, put in other terms, does the soul need to do a mitzvah to get close to God? Isn't the soul already a piece of God? Why does the soul have to do a mitzvah? What's with the mitzvah? So listen to what he says. This is what he starts in 35 and we pick up here. He says, the soul, even the most selfless soul, but a soul here on earth in a body, is a separate, independent, spiritual form of existence. The soul is still an I. When I say I mean like the I, like the letter I, like a me. The soul is still a self-identifying I. There's still some semblance of ego in the soul. Now it's completely spiritual. It's a spiritual ego, but nonetheless, there is a self-identification. There is an I. However, a mitzvah is purely selfless. The act of a mitzvah, the mitzvah act itself, now we could have different intentions when we do a mitzvah, but the mitzvah itself doesn't have its own ego. The mitzvah is pure fuel. It's pure. What does the oil do? The oil burns completely. The oil doesn't resist the combustion. It doesn't resist the fueling. Oil, right? An oil lamp, you stick a wick in and you light it on fire. The oil is drawn into the wick and the fire burns the fuel, the oil, and it burns completely and seamlessly until all the oil is done. The oil is completely what we call selfless. It completely is, I don't know what the right English word is, but it's purely, it goes into, it flows into, it feeds into that combustion experience, and it completely fuels the fire until it's completely done. A soul is not completely without ego. It has a spiritual ego, but it has an ego. Whereas a mitzvah is completely selfless. A mitzvah doesn't have its own identity. A mitzvah is completely being in the service of God. So therefore, he says, you need a soul in a body doing a mitzvah to create the light. Without doing the mitzvah, the soul itself would provide a little bit of resistance to the experience. So you need a soul in a body doing a mitzvah to produce the light that illuminates the world. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen, because this is the theme that he picks up in chapter 51, and it's really beautiful. And the imagery is, it's gorgeous imagery, you know, fire and lamps and oil and wicks. It's very bright. It's very illuminating. So we're going to study together. So here I have up on my screen, chapter 51, and there's a long introduction, a very long introduction. And it basically, I'm looking at it now, basically says what I said before. You know what? Let's read this a little bit. Let's start. I'm going to read. I usually don't read the intro, but let's read a little bit of the introduction right now. Basing himself Okay, here, no, let's start from over here. Okay, it's in the introduction where it begins to further explain. To further explain this, don't worry about what we're further explaining. Let's just jump in. So chapter 35 quoted the words of the Yenuka in the Zohar. That's the Yenuka means the young one, that a Jew should not walk 4 cubits bareheaded because the Shekhinah, the divine presence, dwells above his head. This light of the divine presence, continues the Zohar, resembles the light of a lamp, where oil and wick are needed for the flame to keep burning. So the 3 components. The flame is the actual illuminating item. That's what creates the light. But flame is not going to work unless you have both oil and wick. So you need all 3 components. So in a similar way, a Jew should therefore be aware, says the Zohar, of the Shekhinah above him and keep it supplied with oil, good deeds, in order to ensure that the flame of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, keeps its hold on the wick, the physical body, right? So again, if we want the flame, the light to be there, so you need oil, good deeds, done by a physical body, and that's how we get it. So let's continue. Basing himself upon this analogy of the Zohar, all that is from the Zohar. But now what does the Alter Rebbe say? The author of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe asked in the same chapter of 35, why the oil fuel for the light of the Shekhinah has to be good deeds. Why is oil good deeds? The divine soul is truly a part of God above. Why is it not sufficient to serve as this fuel? In other words, the divine soul itself is holy. The divine soul itself is pure. Why isn't the soul itself the fuel? Why do you need to do something to bring the light? Why can't you just be? So he explains, he answers in 35 that the divine soul, even of a perfect tzaddik, is a conscious entity. You see that? Even the perfect tzaddik is self-aware. This conscious existence of the soul does not become utterly overwhelmed and nullified by God's presence in the world to the extent that the soul can become one with God's presence. Therefore, the soul cannot serve as fuel for the light of the Shekhinah, for the oil must become totally converted into light, just as physical fuel is consumed as it burns to become converted into light. So in other words, this is what I was saying, the last point that I was saying before we jumped inside, which is that in order for oil to act as fuel, oil is completely consumed. It's almost like the oil is converted from oil into light, because by the time we're done, there's no oil left. What happened to the oil? The oil transformed into light. It totally gave itself up for the flame, which means there's a pure selflessness there. So he says the soul itself, as holy as it is not as nullified to that extent. Whereas the soul remains in conscious existence. It's only good deeds, mitzvot, that can serve as fuel for the light of the Shekhinah, for they are God's will and his wisdom, which are expressions of his essence, and thus utterly united with him. A mitzvah doesn't have its own consciousness. A mitzvah is only God's will. So it completely is on board with, it doesn't have its own thing. But a soul is already its own identity, its own entity. So for the soul, in order for the soul to become united with God, it must therefore perform mitzvot. So therefore, in order to produce light, you need to have a fuel that allows itself to disappear, which means for the human being to connect with God, to bring light into the world, there has to be something that's done that totally disappears, if you will, that has no ego. And what has no ego? The soul also has an ego. We call that consciousness, right? Conscious existence. The only thing that has no ego, no separate existence, is a mitzvah. Mitzvah is only God's will and wisdom. That's what a mitzvah is. It's what God wants, and it's how God thinks. Has no outside existence, no separate existence. It's the fuel that that can totally be converted into that light. All right, so that is the major idea that he developed in chapter 35. Flame, wick, and oil, the light, the body, the soul. Sorry, the light, the body, the mitzvot. Why do we need a mitzvah? Because the mitzvah is the only pure fuel that converts back into source. Now, in chapter 51, which is what we're up to, now explains further the teaching of the Yenuka that this light of the Shekhinah needs oil. So that's what we're going to pick up on. The idea that the light requires oil, which you said before is mitzvahs. Now, in the Zohar, oil usually refers to chachma, which is wisdom. But here, though, the Yenuka takes it to refer to good deeds. So oil is usually referred to as, oil is usually a reference to chachma, which is wisdom. But in our teaching that we just quoted, oil is good deeds. So he asked the question in 51, what's the connection between practical mitzvot and oil, which refers to chachma? I should explain what chachma is. Chachma is wisdom. Chachma is the highest power of a person, the idea, the ability to conceive of new ideas. That's what chachma is. So just like oil floats to the top, the highest dimension of this, the highest soul power is what we call chachma. And yet, in chapter 35, we quoted the Zohar, the Yenuka that says, what's the oil? Good deeds. So which one is it? Is oil a mitzvah or is it chachma? Is it wisdom? So to clarify, we're going to get into this whole notion about the Shekhinah, the divine presence dwelling on anything. All right, so that's what we're going to go. That's what we're going to do. All right, so let's jump inside now. That's the introduction, but it's going to be so beautiful, so rich with meaning and imagery. So here we go. For further explanation of the words of the Yenuka mentioned earlier in chapter 35, where the Yenuka was quoted as saying that the light of the Shekhinah, which dwells upon a Jew, needs oil, meaning good deeds. Now, what connection do good deeds have with oil, which usually refers to chachma? So to explain this, here's what we're going to do. It is necessary first to explain, so that one may understand a little bit, the concept of the Shekhinah dwelling, that it dwelt in the Holy of Holies, which, by the way, is also relevant to this time of year, because in our Torah portions, we're reading about the instructions for building the Mishkan, the temple, the first tabernacle, the portable sanctuary for God. And why was the tabernacle built? God says, create this temple and I will dwell there, which evokes an immediate question. What does that mean? That God only dwells there? God is not everywhere? And if God is everywhere, then what's the temple for? God is more there than everywhere. Either God is everywhere or he's not everywhere. Understand the question? The question is simply, is God everywhere or in the Holy of Holies? Can't have it both ways. We sing a kid's song. Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, right? God is everywhere. So then what was the temple? So what were we doing? Why do we build it? So that's what he's asking now. We first, to understand all of this about oil and good deeds and chachma and all of that stuff that we just introduced before, to understand it, we need to look in a different direction. What is Shekhinah? What does it mean that God's presence dwelt in the Holy of Holies? What does that even mean? And likewise, the question applies to any other place where the Shekhinah dwells, right? Whether it's the temple, the Holy of Holies, wherever we learn that, oh, that's a holy place, that's where God dwells. What does that concept mean? What is meant when we say that a particular location is distinguished as being a place where the Shekhinah dwells rather than elsewhere? What does that mean? God is only here? Surely, this is the question, surely the whole world is full of his glory. God is everywhere, and no place is void of him. By the way, these quotes, all of these, are sources in scripture and in classic Jewish teaching. The whole world is full of his glory. The There's no place that's empty, that's void of him. So if God is everywhere, so then what's going on in the Holy of Holies? So then what happens over there? What happens in the temple? What happens in any other place that we say the Shekhinah dwells, the divine presence dwells? What does that mean? Isn't God everywhere? The whole world? It's a good question. However, he says, this is the beginning of his answer. However, the key to understanding the subject is to be found in the text. There's a beautiful verse coming from Job. He says, and from my flesh, I see God. You know what that means? On a simple level, it means from where I stand, I can perceive God. But the Alter Rebbe understands these words literally. From my flesh, when I look at my own body, I can see an analogy of God, right? From what we see within ourselves, in our own soul and body, we can visualize the parallel on the spiritual level and the divine emanations and the world in general. By the way, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because this is a huge foundational idea in Kabbalah and Hasidic thought. And that is this verse, from my body, from my flesh, I can see God. It doesn't mean simply, from where I am, I see God. It means by looking at how I operate, how my soul operates in my body, I can understand how God operates in the world. Here's the parallel. Like on those SAT tests or whatever, soul is to body as God is to world. Just like the soul powers the body, God powers the world. So think of it as the microcosm and the macrocosm. The way the small body works is the way the large body works. The small body, which is ours, right? Our physical body, works by virtue of the soul powering it. Well, the large body, which is the world, also operates by the large soul, God, powering it. What that means is there's a parallel between the way we work and the way God works in the world. And the more we look closely and attentively at the particulars of how our soul enlivens our physical body, the better we can understand how God enlivens the world at large. Does that make sense? Yes? So we're using our own biology and spirituality as a parable, as an analogy for the way this works on a cosmic level. And even though it seems like, well, who says just because it works like that with us, that it works like that with God? Number one, the Kabbalah said that. And number two, most importantly, Job says, for my flesh, I see God. By looking, we're not projecting God based on ourselves. On the contrary, we're created a certain way because God created us in his image. So the fact that it works like that with us means that that is the way it works back up there as well. All right, let me pull up the screen again and let's keep on going. The information here is so beautiful and it's written so richly. Okay, let's jump in. So again, let's understand our question. Aside from that introduction about the Yunuka and the lamp and the oil and the wick and the flame, besides for that, we had a central question, a new question in chapter 51. What does it mean that God dwells in the temple? That God dwells in the Holy of Holies? That God dwells in a synagogue? What does that mean? Isn't God everywhere? So he says, good question. Let's look at how we operate. Let's look at how the human body operates. Because when we look at ourselves, we can understand the way it works with God. So he uses the analogy of the human being. By way of analogy, the human soul pervades all 248 organs of the body from head to toe, from head to foot. If I ask you the question, where is your soul? And remember, when I say soul, I mean the life force of the soul. Okay, actually, let me stop sharing so I can see everybody at once, because I don't get to see everybody if I'm sharing. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. Raise your hand if the answer is yes. Is your soul like life force, spiritual battery pack? Is it in your head? Yes. Yes. Okay, good. Is your soul in your torso? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Is your soul in your hand? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Is your soul in your legs? Yeah. Yeah. Is your soul in your toes? Yes. From head to toe, the soul flows. The soul is life. It's like if I would ask you a question, where's your blood? Right? Where's your blood? In your head? Yeah. In your torso? Yeah. In your hands? Yeah. In your legs? Yeah. By the way, if God forbid the blood is not there, that's not good, right? Lack of circulation is not good. I mean, it's very dangerous. So yeah, the blood has to be there, but the blood is the physical manifestation. It's the physical mechanism by which the power, the battery pack of the soul is transmitted, which means that the soul is everywhere. The soul pervades the entire body from head to foot. That's what he just said. Back inside. Again, it's beautiful. It's well developed in this chapter. It's very well articulated. So he says, again, by way of analogy, the human soul pervades all 248 limbs from head to foot. Nevertheless, the soul's principal abode in a revealed state of form and its principal dwelling place in an all-encompassing non-revealed form is in one's brain. And from the brain, the soul is diffused throughout all the organs. When we think about the seat of life for a human being, what's the seat of life? Consciousness, the brain. Even physically, it's the brain that controls the rest of the body. And if the toe gets stubbed, before you feel the pain, it's got to go up to the brain and then back around, right? That's the way it works. Everything goes through the brain, which means where's the soul? Everywhere, throughout the whole body. But where's its headquarters? In the head, in the brain. And that's not a contradiction, because it's from there that it continues to spread everywhere. Does that make sense? So yes, the soul is everywhere, but it's from the seat of the brain that it spreads everywhere. Does that make sense? Moreover, each organ receives from it, the soul, a different form of life force and functional power appropriate to it according to its composition and character. Let me explain. Every part of the body has a different function, a different nature. As he's about to say, the eye sees, the ear hears, the mouth speaks, the feet walk. Every part of the body does something else. And the soul gives every part of the body its own specific power and energy. It's kind of like, see if we have an example of this, another physical example that we could give other than the human body. It's like, I don't know. I don't have a good example that comes to mind. Something with electricity, I'm sure, would work. But it's not like the same soul power of sight that's in the eye goes into the ear. It's a different energy that flows. One is the power of sight in the eye. So in other words, there's a spiritual power, and then there's the physical container for the power. So you have the spiritual power of sight that's in the container of the eye, and the spiritual power of hearing, the ear. And what else did he say? We have to bring it back up, but maybe feeling in the heart and walking in the feet, whatever it is, right? Touching with the hands. So each limb, each part of the body is equally energized by the soul, but in a unique fashion, because each limb has a unique purpose. The eye has a different purpose than the ear and the mouth. Oh, that was the mouth. And the mouth and the feet and so on. So everything is different, and therefore everything receives a little bit of a different energy from the soul. So let's read this inside. Moreover, each organ receives from the soul a different form of life force and functional power appropriate to it and according to the organ's composition and character. For example, the eye receives from the soul a life force and ability to see. The power of sight accords with the smooth and translucent nature of the tissue of the eye. I love that, right? It's the energy is sight. And look at this. The physical, biological form of the eye works with that power. It's amazing. And the ear receives from the soul a life force and ability to hear. And guess what? The ear has the physical components that allow that to work. The mouth has the power to speak, the feet to walk, etc. Each organ in the body, in accordance with its composition and character, receives its life force and ability from the soul, which, as we said before, is headquartered in and becomes revealed initially in the brain. I want to give another example. I said the word headquarters, and you know what? I actually like that. Headquarters. Coca-Cola. Where is Coca-Cola? Everywhere. Everywhere you go, it's Coca-Cola. You know, they just sent the Discovery, I don't know if it's called Discovery. They sent the rover to Mars. Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this. It came out a few days ago. I don't know if you saw this, that the rover thing that landed on Mars found two artifacts. They were shocked. They didn't realize this was going to happen. Two artifacts. Number one, an empty bottle of Coca-Cola. And number two, a Chabad house. They found two things on Mars. Why? Because wherever you go, you're guaranteed to find two things, Coca-Cola and Chabad. And the truth is, Coca-Cola knows where to go based on if Chabad is there or not. That's the truth. So what's the point? The point is, let's say Coca-Cola. They have a distribution system that goes everywhere. And each country has its own language, its own marketing, every country on its own. But there's still a headquarters, right? It's not headquartered everywhere. There's a headquarters. And from the headquarters, it goes out. And it's differentiated. You with me about differentiation? So yes, Coca-Cola is everywhere, but it's headquartered in one space, and then it's differentiated to then go into each place on its own. So headquarters will think, well, how do you market Coca-Cola in Vietnam? How do you market Coca-Cola in South Africa? How do you market Coca-Cola in Brazil? How do you market Coca-Cola in Miami? And it's going to be a different situation. It's a different reality. So you have the core of it, which is everywhere, but it's differentiated. And there's a headquarters that then figures that out. So let's go back inside. I know I'm giving a really simplistic example. Hold on one second. I just saw the chat popped up. Good. What are the 248 organs? Yes. Liver, stomach, yes. According to Jewish thought, there are 248 limbs of the body. The brain, the eyes, each one of them is considered to be a limb. The fingers, each one would be a limb. So there are 248 limbs. I don't know that I've ever seen them, sketched out and detailed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's the limbs of the body. In addition, by the way, there are 365 veins or arteries in the body, 248 plus limbs, and 365 arteries and veins equals 613. This is where the number parallels the number of mitzvot we have. And 248 is also the number of the positive mitzvot that we have, which means that every limb has a mitzvah. And the 365 parallel the 365 prohibitions, things that we're not supposed to do, which means we're not supposed to clog the arteries, right? We're not supposed to clog the connection. So we do with our limbs the mitzvot, and we avoid blocking the arteries and the veins. Does that make sense? This is, again, I've never seen it mapped out, but this is in all the sources, both philosophy and mysticism. It's 248 limbs, 365 veins, arteries, sinews, etc. Okay, but yeah, that's what it means. Liver, stomach, etc. let's go back into the chapter, and we're talking about headquarters now. All right. So again, we said that each organ, I'm going back a little bit, each organ receives from the soul a very different form of life force that is appropriate to its composition and character. Give me 1 second. I need to do one thing. And that is, speaking about battery, about energy, I got to plug in. I forgot to plug in my computer. So we got to do that now. Boom. Okay, I'm back and we are now plugged in. So here's the deal. We said before, a moment ago, that each organ receives from the soul its own type of life force that is commensurate and appropriate to its composition and character. And we gave examples of the eye, the ear, etc. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, and each one, let's go back over here, and each one receives each limb receives in accordance with its composition and character. And it receives its ability from the soul, which, as we said before, is headquarters, dwells and becomes revealed initially in the brain. So the soul, look, the soul is everywhere. The soul is flowing throughout the whole body, but its headquarters is in the brain, right? The brain is the headquarters. Look, human life can go on, God forbid, right? But God forbid, without a hand, human life can go on. But you take out the head, right? You're done. That's it. Finished. Okay, so yeah, there's soul in the fingertip, but it's not the headquarters. It's not central command. So the soul is everywhere, but it has a central command. That's in the brain. That's central command of the soul. The soul is not the brain. The soul is a soul, but its seat, its headquarters, right? Its comfortable chair is in the brain. That's where it hangs out. That's where its central headquarters is. Central command with the joysticks and the thing. And from there, it starts differentiating its energy. Sight to the eye, hearing to the ear, taste to the mouth, walking to the feet. Each one gets its thing. As we see clearly, look at this. Remember, this is written, remember, this is written 1798, 1898, 1998, 223 years ago, something like that. Okay, look what he says here about biology. As we clearly sense how in the brain, one is conscious of all that occurs within the 248 organs and of everything experienced by them. The brain is aware of everything going on in the entire body. The one brain that's in the head is aware immediately of everything that's going on in the rest of the body. Isn't that, you thought it was a soul, Ellie? Yeah, the soul is in the brain. But what's going on? Central command, baby, right? The brain is aware of the entire geschäft, the whole situation, all the business that's going on, because the brain is the nerve center and principal abode and source of the life force of the entire body. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what he says. And I don't know enough about the evolution of medical science to know when medicine started talking in these terms. I don't know, but I find it pretty cool that 220 something years ago, the Alter Rebbe is basically talking about consciousness and awareness. And I mean, maybe it's obvious, maybe it was known. I'm not saying it wasn't, but it's pretty, I think it's pretty incredible. It's pretty powerful. The brain is the seat of consciousness. And you know what's beautiful about this? It's immediately aware of everything going on. You see, getting back to Coca-Cola, you think the office in Vietnam knows about the challenges that's going on in Brazil? No, they don't. But you know who knows about it? Atlanta. Headquarters knows. because that's headquarters. That's what headquarters job is. Headquarters knows what's going on. Well, I mean, theoretically, I'm not saying, who knows, but right. Headquarters knows what's going on everywhere. That's the definition of headquarters. That's what central command is. But the ones in the field, they don't know what's going on. Like, you think your toe knows that your elbow is itchy? Really? Your toe knows that your elbow is itchy? And it is, by the way. I'm just saying. Okay. Right? Your toe doesn't know about your elbow because a toe's a toe and an elbow's an elbow. Who knows about the toe and the elbow at the same time? The brain. Why? Because the brain is central command of the soul. So the soul, right? Soul's the pilot. Soul's in control. Soul's got this. The soul, buckles into the brain, and it's from the brain that everything else is controlled. All right, back inside. Oh, by the way, we haven't brought it full circle yet. But remember our question? If God is everywhere, why do you need a temple? Well, we have kind of an answer, sort of. Central command, right? And remember, the role of the brain is not just to know what's going on, but to differentiate the energies that are going to each limb. Remember he said that? Remember we said that just a few moments ago? It almost sounded parenthetical, but it's really important, right? What modulates, if that's a word, what modulates the energy flow of the soul, that it should be eyesight for the eye and hearing for the ear and taste for the mouth and walking for the feet? Who does that? Where does that happen? In consciousness. So the soul is not the same everywhere. It's differentiated. Where does it get differentiated? From headquarters. It's then allocated each place what it needs. Let's go back inside. I'm going to skip this very long comment. Here we go. Now, listen to this. This is what I just said. This is literally what I just said. Now, the variation, diversity, in receiving the functional powers and life force by the organs of the body from the soul, the difference between the different powers of each limb, each organ receiving from the soul a life force and power in a different form, that differentiation doesn't, listen to this, does not derive from the soul's essence and being. That we should say that the soul's being and essence is divided into 248 different parts, which are enclosed in 248 different locations, according to the design of the various locations of the body's organs. What he says here is that it's not that the soul itself, the core essence of the soul, has 248 pieces, and each one goes into one location, right? That's not what's going on, right? Imagine you would say like this: take a puzzle, right? Imagine a puzzle, and your puzzle looks like a human body, looks like a torso of a human body, like an outline of a human body, and it's a 248 piece puzzle. Just giving a random number, right? 248 piece puzzle, and it's made whole, and then it's in the box, right? Different pieces, and you start making the puzzle. Oh, this piece goes here. Oh, that's a toe. Oh, it's another toe. Oh, found a finger. No, maybe it's a toe. No, it's a finger. Oh, I found an elbow. Oh, it looks itchy. Yeah. So like you find different pieces, and each goes to its place. Is that what the soul is? The soul has 248 different pieces, and each piece of the soul goes to a different part of the body? No, the soul is not differentiated. The soul is just the soul. It's one holistic entity. So wherein comes the differentiation? That's where the head comes in. When the soul goes into the consciousness, it's the brain that helps send out the soul differently to the different parts of the body. Does that make sense? The brain, the consciousness, allocates the energy of the soul and differentiates between different parts of the body. All right, back inside. We're going to read this inside, and we're going to read this inside. Okay, so we cannot say, this is what we can say. We cannot say that the soul's essence and being itself is distributed into the 248 different parts of the body. Why? Because according to this, it would follow that the soul's essence and being is designed in a physical design and a likeness and structure similar to the structure of the body, God forbid. Right? So if you and I conceive that the soul itself has 248 different parts, well, then the soul sounds like a body. Just like a body has different limbs, the soul also has different limbs. Doesn't make sense, right? Just as the organs of the body have various shapes and forms, so according to this outlook, which is not the correct outlook, this is the outlook that he's saying, don't think this outlook. So it's the incorrect outlook. But according to this outlook, that would be also the functional powers, while still within the soul, are different from each other in form. But again, we cannot accept this. We cannot say that this is so, that the soul is like the body and has different shapes and forms to it. Rather, the soul is entirely a single spiritual entity. It is a single entity and it's a spiritual entity. As a single entity, its oneness is plain and uncompounded. It's not a composite. It's not a composite being cobbled together of 248 different puzzle pieces. It's a single entity called soul. And as a spiritual entity, its spirituality is in a form which is divested of any physical design and of any type of definition of physical space, measure, or limitation. So again, the soul is singular and spiritual, which means it doesn't look like a body. It doesn't have different parts like a body. It's one single holistic unit. That's it. It's one spiritual, non-physical, non-formed life force. The soul is free of all such dimensions by virtue of its intrinsic being and essence. In other words, its very core is pure and unformed, unshaped, undifferentiated. It's just pure soul. In fact, the soul is so plain and free of all these differentiations that even when it's actually enclosed in the organs, they cannot affect any change in the soul. In other words, even when the soul does flow into the fingertips and to the toes, right, those organs don't affect the soul, as the Alter Rebbe continues. And it is not valid to say concerning the soul's being and essence that it is in the brain of the head more than in the feet, since its being and essence is not subject to the concept and dimension of physical space and limitation. It is therefore impossible to attribute to the soul this limitation of being more in the head than in the feet. So it cannot be said that the soul is more in one place than the other. Rather, 613 kinds of functional powers and vital forces are included within the soul, within its being and essence, to become actualized and to emerge from this concealment and inclusion within the soul's essence. So previously, while still included within the soul's essence, they are only in potentia. They are theoretically 613 powers, but practically it's oneness. And therefore they're hidden within the soul, not even as functional powers which are revealed as such while still included within the soul. In other words, within the soul is concealed the potential for 613 functional powers. That would be the 248 limbs and the 365 arteries and veins to become actualized and to emerge from concealment. We're going to do one more paragraph, and then I'm going to conclude, and then I'll wrap it together. I'll wrap it up in a moment. Within one more paragraph. We're in middle of a concept that he's going to develop over the course of multiple chapters. So we're going to have to go through this slowly, or we're going to have to go through it like one step at a time. So we'll do one more paragraph and then close. In order to animate the 248 organs and 365 blood vessels. Oh, that's what I said before, right? 248 organs and 365 blood vessels. That would be like arteries and veins, anything that carries the blood through it of the body, through the functional powers of the divine soul becoming enclosed within the animating or vital soul, which also possesses the corresponding 248 and 365 functional powers and vital forces. So this piece, I'm going to explain at the beginning of next time. But here's what you need to know about today's conversation. Here's what you need to know about the soul and how it operates in the microcosm of the body. And the whole point of this is to then apply it to the way it works above within the macrocosm. So in short, The way it works within the microcosm, within the human being, is that we have one soul, not 248 souls, not 613 souls. We have one soul. It's pure and it's holistic. However, it has the potential to give life to and inform and shape every individual limb and artery and vein of the body. It has the potential to do that, but the soul itself is pure and undifferentiated. And then the soul flows into the seat of consciousness. Now it flows everywhere, right? And it's not in the head more than in the foot, but when it goes into the head, that becomes headquarters. Not that. The soul is there more than everywhere else, but its central command from where the soul flows equally into the rest of the body. But there is one place from which it emanates, which means imagine the soul as a spiritual entity hovering over the person. Where does it enter? It enters initially into the brain, and from the brain, it then spreads out everywhere else. So is it more in the brain than everywhere else? No, we can't say it's more in the brain. But does the brain serve a unique function due to the being headquarters of the soul, that it controls the rest of the body, that all of the consciousness of the body flows through it, that it is aware of everything that's going on while the individual organs themselves are not laterally aware of each other, but the brain is aware of everything else? Is that true? It is true. This is going to give us profound insight into how God operates in the world by virtue of a headquarters, so to speak. Literally, we call it headquarters because it's like the headquarters. And that is going to be the role of the temple and other spiritual edifices that serve as a consciousness, if you will, or a central command for the rest of the world, of the physical world. So in short, both statements are true. Statement number one, God is everywhere. Statement number two, the temple of old and modern day synagogues, etc., spiritual places, are God's headquarters. Are God? That's where God dwells, or that's where God's headquarters are. It's not a contradiction. Just like in the body, we say vis-a-vis the body, we say that God is everywhere. Sorry, the soul is everywhere, and yet the soul, the headquarters the headquarters of the soul is in the brain. So that's for tonight. This wraps up tonight's session. Next week we're going to continue the topic and develop it further, and we're going to see even more insight into the relationship between soul, mind, and body, and God, temple, universe. The main thing tonight, perhaps a takeaway, is the idea that something could be everywhere, and yet it also needs a specific place of attribution, right? Which is kind of like how we started the class. The soul is very spiritual, but you need to do a physical mitzvah to kind of ground it, right? The soul is everywhere in the body, but you need a brain as headquarters. You need some sort of channeling into it to then bring it home. The same thing is true with our lives as well. We need a soul doing a good deed to really bring heaven down to earth and to illuminate the world and make it a brighter place. So with that in mind, let's do exactly that. Let's take our soul, which is the flame. Let's take our body, which is the wick, and let's channel a mitzvah, a good deed. And with that, as the Eunucha says, as the young prodigy in quote in the Zohar says, with that, we raise the consciousness of the world, and we illuminate the world with the light of God. But it's only through doing something physical, which seems counterintuitive, through something physical, that the spiritual light can be illuminated. And that was his question at the beginning. Why do we need to do something physical to have spiritual light? You need oil. That's the answer. You need oil. You need something physical. All right. Thank you for joining tonight. Next week, we continue the analogy. We continue the journey. We're going to talk about more temple and the world and the soul and the body and the brain and consciousness. And we'll also have more opportunities to say hi to Riva and say hi, Riva.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, Riva.
Hey.
Do you
Who's
like
there?
the class?
You like the class? Well, she was playing a little bit. Did you like what you heard?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
You're gonna know so much. Like you won't need to go to Chaya Mushka school next year.
Right? She's ready to jump in all the way. By the way, who was it? Ellie, is that you over there? Yeah. Ellie, when you were a little guy and we used to do these Tanya classes at my house, at our house, Ellie, you used to sit on my lap like this little one, when we would study Tanya with chicken soup. We had chicken. Mommy made chicken soup Thursday night, and we had chicken soup. Everybody had chicken soup. Those were good times.
Nice.
We would do it, but I feel like if I would give you chicken soup, my computer would get all it probably doesn't bode well for the chips of the computer. What are you gonna do? Please God, we'll be back. We'll be back soon in person. Yes? You like that? And we'll have chicken soup. All right. I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Oh, if you have not, we had a bit of a mishap with the website. So just a few quick announcements. So number one, if you haven't yet signed up for our Holocaust Remembrance event with David Lazan's mom, you got to sign up. It's going to be just incredible. So it's Sunday, March 14th at 7 p.m. Faith and fortitude. So don't miss that and help spread the word. That's number one. Number two, 2 weeks from tonight, we have our paint night with Tanya. Not this Tanya. Her name is Tanya. I figured if the artist name is Tanya, we got to do it Thursday nights. And that way, at least we're having Tanya, right? Either way, it'll be Tanya. So paint night with Tanya. Think Bob Ross, right? Bob Ross?
Rabbi, did you get my email that there were no more openings for the 36?
Yes. So that's what I was about to say. So we had a mishap with our website where it was set accidentally to only allow a limited number of reservations. I took off that limitation and opened it up more. It was not intentional to be like that. It was set wrong. So we removed the limitation and it's ready to go. And we have a beautiful art kit with a canvas and a smock and a tablecloth and the paint, all the paints, 5 different colors, and the paintbrushes, everything you need. Huh?
Okay.
You're 5? So there's red, yellow, blue, black, and
Green.
gold. Oh, green? Maybe green. Who knows? Whatever.
No, green is from blue and yellow. Yeah.
So maybe it's a derivative color. Either way, but we have 5 colors. You'll get all the paint, all the equipment, all the supplies. You don't need any prior artistic skill or painting skill. If you have, great. But even if not, and the painting that we're going to do is absolutely stunning. It's really beautiful.
Is it numbered?
No, it's not numbered. It's not numbered. But she guaranteed me. She told me she's done this many times before, and it works for everybody. And I saw the art. I helped with her. I chose which piece we're doing. It's a gorgeous Western wall piece. It's really beautiful. And she told me, guaranteed me that it is ready to go. When I say ready to go, everyone can do it, and it's going to come out gorgeous. So I will be doing it with everybody else. It's a 2-hour workshop, 7:30. I think it's 7:30. 2 hours is about 2 hours.
No, I'm saying like how long is it?
I know what you mean.
Very long.
It's very long. It's long. 2 hours, 7:30 to 9:30. But by the end, it's not rushed. She leads every step of the way. You know, everything is guided, and there's discussions and schmoozing, and that's it. Riva, who is that? Who is this person right here? Who is that?
Yeah, once I did a class like this with a friend. We were 15 and we did a rooster. And she all taught us, you know, the same rooster, the same technique. And we had 15 different beautiful rooster, but
Right.
each rooster was such a, you know, reflecting the personality of whoever, like I have them in my kitchen of the 4 of us in the family. And
Nice.
you can tell like who's did that rooster. And, but we all
Nice.
listened to the same instruction.
Right, right. She's yeah. We'll see. Everyone's Western Wall is gonna be a little bit different, but it
Yeah,
should be
Be nice.
nice. All right. Can't wait for it. So yeah, but you can definitely sign up. It was a glitch before. I feel terrible because we sent out an email before a few weeks ago, sent out one today, but thank God. I hope everybody that tried, that hit that wall will try again. And I mean, you know, there's only, you know, we'll try our best to get the word out there that it's reservable now. All right.
Maybe we send an email saying,
Yeah, we'll send more. You know us. We'll send. I don't want to send one right away saying, "Oh, we made a mistake." It's like I don't want to bombard people with emails. It's also not nice. So, but we'll get the message out there and help spread the word. It's going to be a really fun night. We have a really nice crowd coming so far, and comes in a really nice box with all your stuff and everything. It'll be a really fun experience. Okay, good. Great to see everybody. I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
thank you, beautiful
Good
class.
Shabbos. Riva, say good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Ellie, Shaya,
Shabbos,
good Shabbos.
Riva, and
Ellie,
Eli,
Shabbos,
and Shaya.
Bye.
See you
Shaya.
in shul.
Yes, please God. We'll see you guys. Take care, everybody. Bye, Dina Malka, Sandrine,
Bye.
Steve, Alex, and
Thank you.
Lisa.
Good Shabbos.
See you guys. Take care.